Great. Let's get started. So as I shared, we're just going to start by talking about what is LGBTQ plus affirming affordable housing for older adults and how will it impact the Baltimore community. And we're going to do this by breaking down the different components of this kind of long-winded title. First, we have LGBTQ plus affirming. So how do we make affordable housing for older adults LGBTQ plus affirming? One of the first steps in this process is ensuring that this housing is community driven, that it's driven by the participation and the feedback from LGBTQ plus older adults in Baltimore. And we've actually had the pleasure to be engaging community about this work for over a year now in Baltimore. Many of those folks that we've talked to about this project are here. I'm so glad that y'all are here. And we plan to continue to engage community in this process to ensure that the building really does meet the needs of LGBTQ plus older adults here in Baltimore. The second way in which we hope to make this project LGBTQ plus affirming is through LGBTQ plus affirming design and services in the building, which we're going to break that down a little bit more in just a second because it's a really big component of how this will be an affirming building. But before we break it down, I just want to name that when we say LGBTQ plus affirming, we do not mean LGBTQ plus exclusive. So this building will not only house LGBTQ plus older adults. Because of fair housing regulations, we can't pick and choose people based on their sexual orientation or gender identity to get into an affordable housing building. And so that's why it's not an LGBTQ plus exclusive community, but we will work hard to ensure this is an LGBTQ plus affirming community through its community-driven nature, the design and services, which we're going to talk about in a second, and its connection to other local organizations. We also have strategies that we've used for other projects across the country that we have supported to ensure that LGBTQ plus older adults are prepared to apply for this development and hopefully then are residents in this development. And so just want to make that clarification because it can be a little bit confusing with the language. So now what do we mean by affirming design and services? Well, first, we imagine that this building could include LGBTQ plus affirming services to the residents and programs for the residents and potentially even for the broader community. In other buildings across the country, this looks like a lot of different things, but we know that we can support the staff of the building to receive culturally competent training in serving LGBTQ plus older adults. And we also know that in other buildings across the country, there are different ways in which community-based organizations or staff are able to convene LGBTQ plus older adults for movie nights, for meetings, for classes, or even for events that the community is hosting around legal aid, financial aid, estate planning. There are so many ways in which we can really ensure that LGBTQ plus affirming programming is sort of written into the nature of this building. And that's a really exciting possibility for this project. The second piece here, which goes right along with that, is that this building will have LGBTQ plus affirming management and processes. So a lot of what the National Housing Initiative at SAGE does to support organizations across the country is to ensure that their processes and their management around housing are LGBTQ plus affirming. That can include intake processes with new residents. It can include navigating complicated cases of discrimination between residents or on the staff. And so we have helped other organizations put policies or procedures or ideas in place to ensure that these complicated situations can be handled smoothly and in a way that is affirming of LGBTQ plus older adults and their identities. Lastly, a really exciting opportunity with this building is that we could use the art of local LGBTQ plus creators to really make this building, from a design perspective, the moment you walk in, you're like, this is an LGBTQ plus affirming building. And there's so many ways we could do that by working with local artists to get their art up in the building, or by working with other type of artists like digital artists or films or movies or things to think about how do we create inclusive programming like a movie night that tells the story of LGBTQ plus people in Baltimore or LGBTQ plus older adults in general. So there's so many different ways that we could explore and imagine how this building really supports LGBTQ plus older adults, but how it also, from the beginning, is an LGBTQ plus affirming building, and folks know that it's an LGBTQ plus affirming building. So now that we've broken down the LGBTQ plus affirming piece, we're also going to touch on the other pieces here. So the other piece of this building is that it's affordable. And so just like many large affordable housing developments, there will be an affordability structure that determines the eligibility of folks getting into this building. And I believe that my colleague Patrick is going to dive into these different affordability components during his presentation. So I won't spend too much time here, but I will say that we have not determined the affordability structure for this building. And so there is opportunity here to hear from y'all, to hear from the community about where the needs are around affordable housing. And that could really shape the direction of the affordability for this building. And then the final component here is that this will be housing geared at serving older adults in Baltimore. I think that many of us know or have experienced that for older adults within the LGBTQ plus community, finding safe and affirming places to age or to age in place can be so incredibly challenging. And so the goal really of this project is to help meet the acute need of this specific community by creating a safe place for LGBTQ plus older adults to find home. I'll quickly note here that this is housing intended to serve older adults, but it is independent living style rental housing. So it is not intended to be assisted living or any type of long-term care in that way. It is independent living style housing. Additionally, we intend to ensure that this housing is safe and accessible for older adults by prioritizing these accessibility and safety considerations. And so the team at Pennrose has talked about ideas like universal design or other ways to really make sure that this project is accessible for older adults at many stages of their life. And then lastly, I will note a lot of affordable housing developments for older adults have an age requirement or an age preference for eligibility. That is not something, again, that's been determined for this building quite yet. While we want this building to meet the needs of older adults in the community, we also know that aging is a variable experience, and depending on your identity intersections, your mental health, your physical health, those things can all impact the age at which you're considered an older adult in your community. So this is, again, something that we really welcome feedback on. We're thinking about how to create a community that's inclusive of older adults and create a community that's inclusive of older adults from many different backgrounds or experiences. And so, again, there's not an age preference or requirement determined, but we're open to feedback on how to make this building specifically meet the needs of older adults with that type of age preference or age requirement. So now I want to touch briefly on the service provision possibilities in this building. Sort of vaguely painted a picture of what's possible in terms of service provision a moment ago. And so I want to be a little bit more specific and provide 3 examples of service provision models that exist across the country for LGBTQ plus affirming affordable housing for older adults. And so these are only 3 models. They're certainly not all of the models, but they are a great way for us to start thinking and imagining what's possible with this building and how could we serve the residents well, but also serve potentially the broader community. So the first model that we're going to look at today is a model that shows less engagement around services than some of the other models. And that certainly doesn't mean it's not an amazing model. This is a great development that serves LGBTQ plus older adults. but the amount of services are less engaged than the other models, which you will see. So in the Spirit on the Lake apartments in Minneapolis, which is an affordable, affirming development for older adults, the property managers connect residents to local LGBTQ plus organizations or affirming services that they might need. So kind of acting like a case manager, providing support and connecting those residents to the needs that they have in the community, which requires those folks to have a really great relationship with these LGBTQ plus affirming organizations in the community, and also to know of those services in the community as well. This next model, the John C. Anderson Apartments in Philadelphia, is a kind of a step up in terms of the level of engagement around services for the residents. In this LGBTQ plus affirming affordable development for older adults, the developer hired service coordinators to specifically operate in the building and connect residents to care. So there are service coordinators there in the building that are connecting residents to the care that they need. But in addition, those service coordinators partner with a local LGBTQ plus community center to provide even more services, programming, medical case management, and I know they provide amazing and many services to the residents in this building. And this is really a great model because the local LGBTQ plus community center is just a couple blocks from this residence. And so the staff can truly walk over, provide care, meet with folks for lunch, like host classes, programming. It's really an amazing model, and it allows the residents to get not only case management, but also community building and programming specifically around LGBTQ plus affirmation and services. So this is a great model. It's also a Pennrose development, which Patrick will share more about later. And it's the oldest model in the country of this kind of style of affordable LGBTQ plus affirming housing for older adults. The last model is one of the more integrated service provision models that we see across the country for this type of housing. And this showcases the Town Hall Apartments in Chicago. The Town Hall Apartments have a local LGBTQ plus organization directly providing that case management service to the residents. And so it's not the service coordinators hired by the developer, and it's not the property managers. It is a local LGBTQ plus organization that already has a history in the community of providing affirming services to LGBTQ plus folks. And they provide that case management to the residents. And now this works really well because this local LGBTQ plus organization actually runs an LGBTQ plus affirming senior center out of the first floor of this apartment building. And this is a very exciting model because not only do residents have access to that senior center, but the senior center is open publicly to the community. And it's an LGBTQ plus affirming senior center, which means they provide affirming services, affirming programming. And like many senior centers, they're providing meals, they're providing support, and not just to the residents, but also to the broader LGBTQ plus older adult community. So this is a very exciting model of service provision that we see with these buildings across the country. And again, these are just to kind of get the thoughts rolling for us about what is really possible here. And I would encourage y'all to think about what services are needed for LGBTQ plus older adults in Baltimore. Where is there a service gap? Or where are there services that do exist but need additional support? And how could this project really help bring or support services to LGBTQ plus older adults in Baltimore? Now I'm going to turn it over to the developer on this project, Pennrose, and my colleague Patrick Stewart is going to speak for Pennrose.
Thank you, Thomas. Appreciate it. Can everyone hear me okay? And nuts and bolts question, Thomas, do I have control over the presentation at this point? Or
no, but if you need me to change the slide, just tell me to change it.
All right, all good. Thank you so much. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. briefly, my name is Patrick Stewart. I'm Regional Vice President with Pennrose. My role with the organization is to oversee our development activities and our work in the Maryland, Virginia, and DC region. I'm based out of Baltimore. My office is in Midtown, right across from Penn Station. I just want to say on a personal level, I'm really deeply invested in this effort, and I feel really honored to have been entrusted with this work of helping kind of crystallize and then ultimately implement this vision to bring LGBTQ plus affirming housing to Baltimore. Literally getting chills as I say that. So I just want to say thank you to Sage and everyone else who has laid the groundwork for this to happen. Really excited. So I'm going to talk a little bit about who we are, what we've done, what our focus is generally. We are going to talk a little bit about some of the factors that kind of influence what development, excuse me, what is feasible and not feasible around affordable housing development. Said this the other day, but I think the good thing about having this conversation this early is that there's so many opportunities to get meaningful input from the community that this place is going to serve, and to shape what it looks like, what it feels like, who specifically it serves, how it goes about doing that, what it looks like, how to make sure it feels safe and welcoming, and all those important things. And I just want to say in this process, it's not always the case that we actually have the opportunity to do it that way and to be as deliberate and proactive in terms of getting that kind of important and critical input from the community this early on in the process. So part of the reason I say that is if you're expecting, pretty pictures and renderings, we don't have those yet, but that's a good thing, because we're going to work with everybody in the community to help develop what that picture looks like. So I guess Thomas, you could, if you don't mind, you could skip to the who is Pennrose slide. So who is Pennrose? We've been around for about 50 years. We are a developer and also manager of multi-housing communities. And I'm using that word deliberately because I'm in the habit of using the term multifamily, which is kind of contrasted with single family. Well, all that really means is it's more than one household under the same roof within a real estate project. It does. If you hear me saying multifamily, it does not mean that we're talking about a family-oriented project, because we are talking about a project that is geared towards and built around the needs of older adults. So just, point of clarification. So I'll say multi-housing. We have a mission-driven focus on specifically affordable housing, but we've done a significant amount of market rate and conventional and mixed use and mixed income housing as well. We, in that time, our numbers are ever increasing, but I think what we really excel at is helping others implement a vision. And so we've had the opportunity over our organization's history to work with scores and scores of housing agencies, nonprofit groups, local community organizations who have a problem to solve or a vision to implement, and often don't have all of the pieces of the puzzle. So we come to the table. We've done some version of this, and we put all those pieces together. We figure out the financing structure. We go after and obtain funding commitments, sometimes which can include a dozen different financing sources. So if you imagine you're going to purchase your own home or car and you have to get 12 different loans, it's like it gets pretty fun. And obviously handling the design and the construction and all of those details. And then again, importantly, walking through the community engagement process. So you go to the next slide, Thomas. Next slide is numbers. I'll kind of gloss over that. The point of this is just to show, yes, we can do this. I promise. We're, real estate folks tend to talk about things in terms of numbers a lot. For me and for our organization, it really does come down to the impact that it has on people and on communities. So we can go to the next one. So this is just to show, first of all, our footprint around the country, we've really been historically focused on like the Eastern Seaboard. Again, I'm based out of Baltimore. We have an office in Philly, and then most importantly here is we've developed, and I think are really proud to have developed a little bit of a reputation and a niche around doing specifically LGBTQ plus affirming housing for older adults. I feel, again, very fortunate that I can kind of build upon that legacy and that institutional knowledge that we've built up, and carry the torch forward and bring this model to Baltimore. Thomas talked about, I think, one of our kind of signature examples, which is John C. Anderson, which I think was in fact if not one of the, if not the first models of this type of housing in the country. And then a project called the Pride, just outside of Boston, which is in construction now. We'll be wrapping up, I think, and starting to have residents move in a little bit later this year. A project called John Arthur Flats, named after Jim Obergefell's partner, subject of this famous Supreme Court case. That's in Cincinnati. That was completed about 2 years ago. And then a host of other similar ventures that were kind of just in different stages in pre-development, et cetera, around the country. So my goal is to have that little thumbnail image in the next maybe 2 years or so. We can talk about timeline a little bit up on this slide in the near future with a star in Baltimore on the map. You can go to the next one, Thomas. Just to talk a little bit about, again, the impact of this type of housing. I don't think I need to talk about this too much, but when we talk about community and what that really means in terms of creating a place, pardon the sirens. Anyone who hears that right now, you might get a sense of how close you are geographically to where I am in the district. But so sorry, talking about community and that it goes really well beyond the bricks and mortar, the walls, the windows, the doors, all those things. And it goes towards creating a place that feels truly welcoming, truly inclusive, and can become just something so meaningful in people's lives. So that's what we're going for. And this was a quote from a resident who was one of the first residents at John C. Anderson, Philadelphia. Next slide. So just some, larger images of some of these projects. We can, Thomas, if it's okay, you can kind of cycle through these, but John C. Anderson, again, finished about 10, 11 years ago, really successful, something we're really proud of. The Pride, I talked a little bit about, under construction right now and delivering later this year. Haven Green in New York, which is in pre-development. Forest Strong School in New Haven, and I think we can just keep going through these, Thomas, if that's all right. York Street, which is like really early on in the process, where we are working with a locally embedded nonprofit organization to kind of map out this concept, kind of similar to where we are in the process right now. And then finally, John Arthur Flats, which I talked about in Cincinnati. I mentioned this the other day, but one of the things that I get most excited about is like these little details where we can find these moments within the design and the concept of a space to really memorialize what its values are, what its meaning is, and who inspired it. And so this tree right here was planted in honor of John Arthur. So, over the years, as people see that grow, it's kind of just like a symbol of what this community means. So I'm excited about finding those same opportunities within what we're going to build in Baltimore. So talking about factors that shape developments. So where do I begin? There are a lot of challenges in the work that we do. It's only really has become more and more difficult, particularly since the onset of COVID, in terms of just the basics that impact the ability to finance and construct something. So interest rates have gone up, construction costs have gone up, and so that comes an increased need for multiple different funding sources that can include public and private. The core of the low-income housing tax credit program, which is that's the thing that's been on the books since the 80s, that generates the tax credit equity that covers most of a project's costs, and then is combined with private loans, grant funds, et cetera, et cetera. It is really increasingly, our work is becoming about not just the coordination of project management, design, construction, all that, but like fundraising. So I do feel like with the impact this project is going to have and what it means for the community, I think we're really uniquely positioned to be able to build upon the relationships, build that momentum, and get out there and raise the support that's going to be needed to figure out how to cover the costs. So little bit about the LIHTC program without going into the weeds. Again, the primary funding vehicle. So low-income housing tax credits are allocated by the state agency. They are purchased by a syndicator or an investor, and then that comes into the project as equity funding up front. There are two kinds of tax credits. There are 9% low-income housing tax credits that are competitively allocated. And then there are 4% sort of as of right credits that get paired with tax exempt bonds. Originally, when the program began, the idea was that 9% credits would finance about 70% of a project's costs. Now that's down to about half, give or take, depending on the structure of the project and the details. The 4% credit tends to finance maybe a quarter or a third of a project's cost. So you get the sense with a project like this, it's likely to be in the $25 to $30 million range in terms of total project cost. Depending on which credit you're able to use, you're going to have a significant need for additional funds. Construction costs, I have a note to myself that not just construction costs, but also operational sustainability. So when we go through a design process, we need to do it in a way that's going to, we need to make sure that the asset, the building itself, is durable, it's high quality, that everything that's installed is going to last and be efficient. Because when you're operating a community like this over several years or decade plus, you want to be able to use the money towards services, right? And those kinds of things, you have to pay salaries, all of that. You don't want to have to be replacing HVAC systems and things of that sort. So we've developed kind of a system over the last several decades and always looking at every project and lessons learned and things like that to be able to build those lessons in and improve upon everything that we do. So other factors: availability, size of the parcel, size of the building. Where we're talking about trying to build this, and we can talk a little bit more about this, I don't know, Thomas, in the Q&A, but generally speaking, Old Goucher, Charles Village, Station North, this area, like there aren't vacant parcels or vacant buildings just kind of waiting to be plucked up and built, right? So when we talk about the community that we're trying to build, we have to figure out where you can do that and what size parcel is going to accommodate what we're trying to do. Zoning is a constraint to some degree in this area, and in Baltimore, that's generally something that we're able to navigate. Safety and security is a big consideration. So the type of building that we're most likely doing here is going to be a mid-rise type with elevators, and so you have an ability to control access. And then obviously, who is the development serving? What are their particular needs? And I talked about it a little bit, but community and stakeholder input. So down to the details, like what is the mix of types of units, bedroom sizes, what are the accessibility features that might need to be built into a building to accommodate the needs of who's going to live there, and that kind of thing. And then down to the fun stuff like interior design and choosing furniture and color schemes, all kind of cool stuff. So with all of that said, I think, Thomas, you can go to the next slide. What we're most likely going to end up with, I think, is a community of about 60 to 70 units. My gut tells me, I think we talked about this a little bit, but like I could easily see this being phase one. And who knows what happens, but we may find that the need for what we're developing here is so great that we're going to have to do it again, which would be a great problem to have. But so back to the concept of financial and operating sustainability, we tend to find in our portfolio, in our experience, that the smaller a community is, it tends to be kind of harder to sustain the operations and cover project expenses. The margins are narrower. We know that because it's affordable housing, income and rental revenue to the project, because it's rent restricted, is capped, and yet your expenses are not capped. So the smaller it is, it tends to create challenges. We want to be able to develop at scale to create efficiencies. At the same time, you don't want to make it so large that it starts to dilute the feel and the identity and the sense of belonging that we're trying to create here. So what we've done elsewhere with the communities that I kind of ran through quickly is, kind of in the 50, 60, 70 unit range. I think that's generally going to be where we land at. The building type, again, is most likely going to be something like what you're seeing on screen here, 4 or 5 story elevator building. The bedroom mix is something that I think we're really going to want to have some more input on, based on what are the household sizes of the community that we're serving. But you can include a mix of studios or efficiencies, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms. If we needed to go larger than that, we could, but my sense is, generally speaking, older adults, it tends to be smaller unit sizes. And then in terms of unit amenities, these are all to be determined and we need input on, but generally for us, the goal is there should be no obvious distinction between affordable housing and its, market rate or conventional counterpart in terms of quality, aesthetics, amenities, finishes. The recent projects we've done, the slide that I showed before is our project called Renaissance Row in Park Heights. We did granite countertops there. It's like, what we love to see is people walking in and being like, wow, what? This is affordable housing? I didn't think this is what it looked like. So that's the goal, for people to feel happy and proud of the place that they live in. Open floor plans, Energy Star appliances, energy efficiency is a big, big thing and can mean a lot in terms of keeping people's bills down month to month. Talked about accessibility features a little bit. The fact that the building is each floor is served by an elevator means that you can create mobility, accessibility on each level. And then, talking about safety and security, making sure you're embedding those features that will make people feel safe and secure, that they can control, who's coming and going, having an intercom system in their unit. So if somebody's buzzing them, they can have some control over that. And then community amenities, Thomas talked about the on-site services model. So that's something that we're going to pay close attention to, is within the building, what kinds of services are going to be provided in terms of healthcare access, things like that. If there's going to be an outside group sort of located within the building, what are their space needs? How much square footage do we need to allocate for that? And then lay it out from that standpoint. And then space is for this to really feel and act and look like a community, for people to have impromptu parties, gatherings, events, and just, all of the soft things that promote a sense of belonging. And again, shared identity and community and things like that. Art is a big one. There's a couple images on here where we show interior design of some of the buildings that we've done. That to me is like, those are great opportunities for people to kind of put their imprint on the place that they and others in the community are going to end up living in. The other one is name. That one I'm really excited about, because as you can tell from the communities that we've been able to work on, there's a lot of significance in, calling a place John C. Anderson or John Arthur or something like that. So that's a great opportunity. And we'll be working on that. You can go ahead, Thomas. And Thomas, thank you, by the way, for making the slide bigger. I have to put my glasses on. there's a lot of numbers, and this is not like visually, graphically a great slide. But so I did think, based on some of the questions that we got on Wednesday, I thought it'd be useful to just sort of talk about, within the context of the low-income housing tax credit program, what does affordability actually mean? What are the rent and income levels? I think a lot of people are actually surprised to learn that if you look at some of these numbers, 80% area median income for a 4-person household is like almost $100,000. That's considered affordable within the LIHTC program. I'm going to talk in a second about how this translates into rent limits. The bottom portion of the table, those are the maximum rents that are allowable under the LIHTC program. This does not necessarily mean that that's the rent that's going to be charged, because what one thing you do is you deduct utility allowances from this rent. The program is supposed to work so that of a person's household income, the rent is calculated to be affordable based on paying no more than 30% of your gross income towards rent and utilities. So that's kind of what we're looking at here. And so the bottom rent numbers are a calculation of what that would result in based on the income levels above. But again, there are opportunities to structure this in a way that's inclusive and really reflects the diversity of incomes at the household level within the community that we're serving. So I think that's one of the things we'll be working on, is like getting that real input from the community, surveys, et cetera, so that when this place is built and those income restrictions are implemented, that it results in the community still being inclusive. So we can talk a little bit more about that if we need to. Any questions that come up, more than happy to answer. But again, where I think this is probably headed is an opportunity to structure units that have rents targeting all of these different ranges and affordable to all of these different ranges. Focus area, talked about it a little bit, but I think, if there are questions about how we kind of landed on this geographical area, I think Thomas, you could probably shed some light on that. But generally speaking, the input has been, it feels like the community kind of belongs somewhere in this area of the map. And I said this the other day, but we're not trying to be too sort of prescriptive about that. It's not like if a site shows up and feels like makes perfect sense, like we're not going to be, I don't think, too exclusive about that. I think there are opportunities to come back to the community and kind of check in and say, there's an opportunity we're looking at. Does this feel like it's the right fit? That sort of thing. But generally speaking, this is kind of where we're targeting our focus. In terms of site selection, this is, again, it's a challenge. This is a built up area of the city. And so we need to kind of roll up our sleeves and find opportunities that are off market, so to speak. We have looked at a few and some things that haven't panned out. That is like top of the list right now in terms of where we are in the process. And we are trying to engage with the city, and they have been very receptive and helpful about potentially looking at some city-owned properties and buildings to be able to utilize those resources to help make this project happen. So next slide. And then just in terms of process, I said it, but we are really, really early on in the process, which is a really good thing in terms of our ability to be able to continue to get input from the community. We're at this kind of inception and community planning stage. And the rest of it, this kind of just gives you a sense of the rest of the pieces that we have to put together before this becomes a place that people are actually living in. So next immediate step would be site acquisition. So that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to acquire a site before we start construction. We'll use a looser concept site controller and get an agreement in place that says, yes, we will acquire the property by a certain moment in time for, on certain terms. But so then we have to go through what we'll call the entitlement process, which is basically getting approvals in place that say, yes, you can build this in this spot. We manage an entire pre-development process, design. We go through a really rigorous design process with the architect and with the contractor at the table to make sure, like from a constructability and product quality standpoint, all those things, that we're doing it the right way. We have a Pennrose design standard that's I mean, it's like this thick and gets bigger each time we do a project, that attempts to kind of encapsulate all of the lessons learned, successes and sometimes failures that we've had through past projects. So the financing process is probably, it's not just a step, it's like a continual step throughout the process. And then, you know, we're in construction, and then it looks at the operating stage of the project. In terms of timing, I'm always hesitant to throw out schedules when, especially when we're this early in the process. And I'm not going to say, like I did Wednesday, that this is going to take 12 years, Monty. But in general, where we are right now, again, is really focused on trying to find the place, the site that we're going to do this. So the goal in the next couple months would be to secure site control, get in position to be able to submit a funding application for tax credits, whether that be the 9% variety or the 4% variety, later this calendar year. If it's 9% credits, that's likely, I mean, it's contingent on what the state calendar looks like, but there, I think we're kind of assuming they're going to do around later this calendar year. And then between those two things, because we do have to submit some sort of semblance of what the project design looks like, in the next several months, there's again great opportunities for us to come back and say, we found a site, here's kind of what the box looks like in terms of the number of units and the scale of it. What do we want to do in terms of the design moves and the aesthetics and things like that make people feel like this is our community? So that's going to be exciting, I think, the rest of this year. Once we secure a tax credit reservation, I'm going to ballpark it and say, and this will require that we get some help from the city in terms of getting through the permit process, but let's say that's about a 12-month process. That's going to take us mostly through next year, through 2025. And then I think the goal would be first quarter of 2026, close on the financing, start construction. And then for this type of building, assuming it's about the scale and size that I talked about, we're probably looking at about a 15-month construction schedule. And then as we get further into construction, then there's the opportunity to start that targeted outreach and engagement and marketing process, which I should actually say we're going to start much earlier than that to make sure that everybody is aware of and has the opportunity to take advantage of this housing. So I think that's it for my piece, Thomas. I feel like I've been talking for way too long, so I'm going to stop and we can get into whatever questions people might have.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. That was very informative. And Patrick has been such an amazing partner in this work and is very committed to this work. So just thank you for being here and all your work on this project. We are now going to open the floor to questions from y'all, feedback from y'all. We really want to hear from y'all about this project. And so I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen so that I can see everyone's beautiful faces. Great, but yeah, let's dive in. Carlton, I see you have your hand raised, and I can't think of a better person to start us off.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your presentation as well. I was wondering twofold. First, will the building be modernized so that you will have step-in showers or something? How would that layout look out for those who are in the elderly, in the older age, the aging age? That's what I was looking for. And then the second question on top of that, would there, had you thought about renovating an old building and building within? Is that something that may be something to look down the way?
Thank you, Carlton. Thomas, you want to take those? So yes and yes. in terms of accessibility features, roll-in showers are often a feature, at least for like a handful of units within a building or a community that serves older adults. Absolutely, yes. We would, by definition, be doing at least 5% of the units that have UFAS or ADA mobility accessibility features. And then there's always an option, if there's a need for it, to do more than that. But particularly for the showers, to your question, yes, that is something that we will typically do, is design it in a way that accommodates a wheelchair to be able to roll into the shower. I think that hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, that was one.
Great. Okay. And then the second one is the opportunity to renovate an existing building. That I think that question comes up every time we kind of have one of these conversations. So I'm starting to get the sense that that's a goal. One of the places that I alluded to having conversations with the city about has that potential opportunity where there are existing structures. If we could find a place that that has that, I think that would be personally really cool to be able to kind of keep some of the history of the neighborhood intact, but to use your word, modernize, bring it up to date, and retrofit it, adaptively reuse it to repurpose for housing. I think that would be a really cool opportunity. So we're definitely trying to figure that out.
Thanks, Carlton. Any follow-up questions, Carlton?
Yes, and in regards to when you said affordable, how you're basing it off what the federal, or is it the federal, oh, I forgot what's the word. It's a register that declares you in poverty rate. So that's where I was asked, are you basing it on people's poverty rate, or basing it on what the federal guidelines is for a one-family poverty rate versus two-family poverty rate, and so on of that nature?
Yep. So the table that I showed was like a layout of what, under the low-income housing tax credit program, how it defines household area median income based on where you are. So that was for Baltimore, and it defines different levels based on, again, household size. So it would be adjusted for household size, and then based on where the household's income level is at, that's how the monthly rent gets determined.
So just to clarify, Patrick, it's based on the how somebody's income relates to the median income in that area, correct?
Correct. So for
Okay.
Baltimore, the median income is about 122,000. And then it sets percentages. So within the LIHTC program, it can go up to 80% of area median income. 50% of AMI for a 4-person household is 61,000 or something like that, and it kind of varies from that point, if that makes sense. And then I don't know, Carlton, if this is part of your question, but one of the things that I think we also will have to navigate is, for the very lowest income households, project-based vouchers are often a tool to make sure that affordability can go much deeper. At the same time, the project-based voucher program, it being a federal program, can create some challenges from like a fair housing standpoint. It creates different priorities and preferences that can actually, to some degree, conflict with what we're trying to do here. So that's something we'll have to figure out based on getting more input from the community about what the household income levels and therefore needs are.
Yeah, that was one of the follow-up questions I had.
And Carlton, if you want me to share the slides, and this goes to anyone, if you'd like me to share the slides with you after, so you can kind of keep looking into some of this information, I'm happy to send over those slides if I haven't already. I know I sent them to some of y'all. Shauna.
I had a question since we're on the lowest income affordability. Would you be coordinating with housing about to house people who are homeless and create opportunities for those folks through this project?
That could definitely be an opportunity. Yeah, again, so we've done, so we're building a project right now in Baltimore that has a set aside for, I forget if it's 7 or 8 units within kind of a larger development that are set aside for persons experiencing homelessness. It's still under construction. We're working with a local nonprofit that provides the services for people within that sort of target population. Again, nothing is set in stone. So I think as we work through the process and work with the community to figure out where the needs are, that's definitely, I think, something to explore. Now, I will also say the critical piece with housing for persons experiencing homelessness is the services model, and making sure that you're not just creating the unit, that you have the support network and you have a funding source in place to cover the services over the life of the project. So
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, I don't know if you're aware that Maryland has ACEs program, which provides supportive services through Medicaid to people who are experiencing homelessness who are then housed. So that would be a good source for that kind of enhanced services. So I don't know who you're working with in your other project, but I know Healthcare for the Homeless is very involved with creating affordable housing. They might be a good organization to reach out to for the
Great
planning of
suggestion.
this.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Shauna. We've actually chatted with them a little bit, and their model is unbelievable. They're doing really great work. And so we plan to keep them connected to this project in whatever capacity we're able to.
Great, thanks.
Yep. I think Leslie was next, and then we'll go to Dr. Greg. Leslie, go for it.
Thanks, Thomas. Yeah, thanks. Patrick, excellent presentation. I'm with the Maryland Department of Aging. So anytime we're talking about housing and older adults, MDOA is a strong support. And so thank you.
Appreciate that.
And I apologize if I missed a little of this, Patrick, but common area spaces. I mean, did you envision, exercise areas or just meeting areas, or truly just units, or maybe talk a little bit about that, just because it kind of lends to who would be potentially coming in, and then of course who manages that part of it.
Absolutely. So we're particularly within a community that serves older adults, we're always trying to figure out ways to promote health and wellness within that. So it's, I think I glossed over the concept of like a fitness center, but that is typically something that we will include within a building. And it can be, sized based on the size of the population, et cetera. But for the older adult community would include fitness equipment that's, more geared towards them. We also sometimes, if space permits and if people think it makes sense, we have looked at doing outdoor exercise equipment. And then we've also done, things like media rooms where you can have like movie nights and stuff like that. Those are the pieces, like there's nothing I would really rule out. You want to create spaces within the building, again, that people have asked for and that, meet their needs. So that's part of sort of like the engagement and charrette process that I think we're looking forward to going through as we proceed.
Thank you. Well, we look forward to watching the project.
Thanks, Leslie. Dr. Greg Finch.
Yeah, hey, Greg is fine. It's just what I have on.
Great.
Yeah. First of all, hurrah for Baltimore. And I hope that this will be a model for other cities down the line so that we're creative with it. Just a point of reference, I worked when I was in DC for the National Center for Creative Aging, which has a range of initiatives that can help focus on how that whole person care and all of that. So I think there's some synchronicities here that would be lovely. The actual question is, So well done. And in describing those 3 layers or management up to the more embedded senior center, that I personally would lean toward that because of just the engagement and interactivity and all of that. I'm wondering how or what is the kind of process for thinking about that and what you all have already seen. Is it leaning more that direction, which makes a lot of sense, and there's a lot of additional buy-in beyond and flow through of individuals? So just that general process and where you're leaning. Thank you.
Yeah. Patrick, I'm happy to speak a little bit to this one, and then you can hop in if you'd like.
Yeah.
But Greg, first of all, I love the shirt. I love a floral pattern. Just wanted to say that. But that's a great question. We are seeing this model of having that senior center embedded into the first floor of the building. It's definitely growing more popularity across the country as we think about these buildings, and as people think about, these buildings can't house every older adult that needs affordable housing in a city. So what could it look like to ensure that there are some type of services that are community facing for the folks who aren't able to gain residence in the building, but might still need some of those services that are LGBTQ plus affirming. So there's definitely, I would say, a lot of growing interest in this type of model. Specifically in our community engagement work in Baltimore, we are in the, as Patrick said, earlier stages of this project. And this is really our first time with community talking about services. And so we welcome like the engagement from y'all on, what type of service model sounds like it would really meet the needs of the community. Based on the needs that we've seen in our engagement so far, I think having a more integrated and like community facing model of services could be really beneficial in this building.
Yeah.
And in terms of the process, I think one of the biggest things is identifying like funding and identifying like which community-based organization can like hold that space in the building. And so, as we continue to have these conversations and get more and more updates, we'll be certain to share those things with you. But the funding piece is huge because funding for services in perpetuity is already a challenge. And then if it's these sort of intensive and embedded services, it just means more money. And so that's, I think, one of the biggest challenges.
Yeah.
But we're early in this process. And so we really appreciate the feedback. And there's, as Patrick said, there is so much possibility, which is why it's exciting that we're having these conversations early, because we can really kind of explore what could come from this.
Yes.
Does that answer your question, Greg?
Yes, very clearly. And maybe I'll just drop it in the hopper. I'll be following, or however I can support this. I'll say that I'm in. I was alerted through someone at Chase Brexton that said you ought to be here. I'll just say one quick thing. Patrick, you all probably have already explored this just from the work with the National Center. In like West Hollywood has a development there for seniors, and it integrates art making, but they have a resident, they actually have a theater that's on the first floor. It's a full out 99-seat theater. So it generates its own community, and the residents work on the sets and all of this stuff. And they're just some really amazing models, and it's in West Hollywood, and it's just a model community that maybe could borrow, but they're all over the country. So I'm sure you've looked at it. I'll be happy to be a resource if ever helpful.
That's great. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Always looking to learn. So thank you.
I think that Carlton was next, but I could be wrong. I see we have 2 questions. Carlton, why don't you go first?
Okay, just what following, how many, this is your first time, not your first time per se in Baltimore, but how many units are you looking to dedicate to the community after you had said it was a multi cultural type of living situation? And how long can a person have their lease? Is it 1 year, 2 years, 5 years down the line?
So great questions. I think the number I put up on one of those slides it's an estimate at this point, and it again depends on a lot of things. Probably first and foremost of which is how big of a piece of real estate will we have to be able to build a building on. But ideally, in our experience, again, like too small can be a challenge to cover all the expenses, right? Too big, you're getting to a point where you maybe lose that sense of cohesion and of community. So I think something like, 60, 70 units, something like that. Just for reference, one of the images I showed was for a community called Renaissance Row in Park Heights. That's an 84 unit, 4-story building, and was on a parcel size was about 1.5 acres. So generally, like, it tends to be, unless you're trying to go really tall, which gets really expensive, 60 units per acre is about where it tends to make sense. So I guess what I'm saying is we're trying to find a parcel that's about 1 acre or more to be able to do what we think we're trying to do here. And then as far as lease term goes, we're trying to build a place that people can stay in for as long as they want to.
And Carlton, I'll just add to a piece of your question there, which was, I think you asked like about the units and how many could be designated for community. Is that part of what you were asking too? I shared earlier, I think, maybe, I know you hopped on a few minutes late. I shared that because of fair housing regulations, we actually can't pick and choose who gets a unit based on their identity factors. And so one of the biggest challenges in creating this type of community is really working hard with our outreach and engaging with community members so that when it comes time to lease up the property, the community, the LGBTQ plus older adult community, are like first in line with their applications. And so our goal is to really stay in touch with y'all throughout this process so that when it comes time to start engaging around the application and leasing the units, we are ready to, get applications in from the community and hopefully get folks into the building. Unfortunately, we can't guarantee a unit for anyone, but that's the process of how we kind of really mobilize the community with the application and the lease up process to try to ensure that LGBTQ plus elders end up getting residence in the building. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, that helps quite a bit because I know around where I live, there are senior buildings, but yeah, you have to be a certain age and you have to meet a certain qualification. And so that's why I was asking. And especially people living. I did want to ask you in regards to how are you helping people living where HIV get secure housing as well?
That's a great question, Carlton. And I think one of the hopes of this building is that it would create a safe space for people with HIV to age in community, specifically LGBTQ plus people, but also anyone with HIV. I think there are opportunities for collaboration with organizations that are serving people living with HIV to ensure that we really are engaged with those communities, and so that they know when the application's opening, making sure that folks get in there. And we're also open to lots of suggestions and engagement from the community to ensure that people living with HIV are represented in the community engagement and also as we begin to lease up. And I don't know, this is maybe something we can all talk about as well, but I know there are specific opportunities for funding for services or housing for people living with HIV. So as we think about specifically funding the services for this building, it could be compelling to try to engage those type of services and really provide services for people with HIV as well. I don't know. I'm speaking too soon, Patrick, but confirm me if that's or I guess correct me if that's incorrect. So
no, that sounds great. Well said.
Trisha, I believe that you were next.
Thank you, Thomas. I just wanted to speak to Greg's question and also Carlton's as well. At Chase Brexton, the Center for LGBTQ Health Equity, Carlton, as you definitely know, through our Elder Pride program, we're working on a new initiative called the Elder Pride Alliance. And what that will be is a group of organizations. It doesn't have to be a specific type of organization. It just has to serve our stakeholders, which are LGBT elders age 50 and up, and also people aging with HIV. And so what we're hoping to do with that Elder Pride Alliance, and also in partnership with SAGE and Pennrose in this project, is to help bolster that access to the community so that we can really reach our stakeholders that we're trying to serve, and not only get as much information as we can about the project, but then also push that information when we need to distribute it to the community, kind of have that network already in place with our Elder Pride Alliance in order to be able to reach our community effectively and efficiently.
Yeah, we're
Thank
very
you.
excited about the Elder Pride Alliance. I think it's going to be a really wonderful network, and we're so grateful for y'all's willingness and support to share about this project with the network of agencies that are serving LGBTQ plus older adults. Thanks, Trisha. Shauna.
Again, these are probably things you've thought about, but just for my own curiosity. One is, I'm just curious, I don't know what the status of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is and whether that is a resource. And then the other question is, at what point do you start engaging with community organizations in the area where you're looking to build? Do you wait until you have a site? I know that I live in Charles Village, and I know our community association has very strong opinions about development. So
Yeah.
just curious about that process.
I can speak to the second question, but we have already started engaging some community-based organizations and partners in Baltimore, and we are very open to engaging more, I would say, and especially as we start to think about and hone into this area where we hope to find a site. We definitely want to be engaging with neighborhood associations, with local groups specifically in that area, because so far we focus most of our engagement on organizations that are serving LGBTQ plus individuals in Baltimore, and then also organizations that are serving older adults in Baltimore. So we've really focused on those two areas. And as we hone into the specific location, I think we're really going to want to be also engaging with the neighborhood and the community specifically, because I think it's super fair that there are a lot of opinions about development, because development deeply impacts the neighborhood. And so we want to be sure that we're communicating with folks in the neighborhood. And, as Patrick said, there's kind of this broad area that we're looking at. And I can share that we're looking in that sort of like Old Goucher, Station North, Charles Village area, because in the community engagement we've done over the last year, which is surveys, some informational interviews with older adults in the community, and then also some focus groups that Free State helped us to put on. With some of these engagement efforts over the past year, we really identified with community that they wanted this building to be in a place where there was close access to transportation, access to food, and where there was access to LGBTQ plus affirming services, and also in a neighborhood that felt safe for LGBTQ plus identifying people in Baltimore. And so that's kind of how we drew the large circle. But as Patrick said, if a really compelling site pops up outside of this circle, that it's like meeting still a lot of the needs of the community, we're still definitely going to be looking into that and engaging the community for feedback around that. So we have kind of the target area based on community feedback, but we're also really open to compelling opportunities that might be outside that area. So all of that to say, that's kind of how we drew the circle on the map. And to answer your second question, we are absolutely ready to start, engaging folks specifically in this neighborhood and area, and to continue to engage just community-based organizations in Baltimore in general. And then I completely forgot your first question.
Oh, I was just wondering if the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, I don't know what the status of that is, if that's helpful to you all at all, or.
Sure hope so. No, I mean, this will, I mean, I kind of alluded to it in the beginning, right? Every project like this, or not even close to as, unique and innovative as this, has increasing funding needs every time we get out there. So it's going to be an everything but the kitchen sink kind of approach. At the local level, the home funds, to the degree that they have housing trust funds, at the state level, the rental housing program funds, where the legislative session just wrapped up, and encouragingly, there's a significant increase to rental housing works. Part of that depends on, again, like, what's our success in going for competitive tax credits. This is a whole other conversation, but that program is really geared around family housing. And so for this model to go in and seek competitive tax credits would require either a change to the what's called a qualified allocation plan, which I think, I'm going to be making comments around that, because I think if you're not allocating a scarce resource to housing for an underserved community, then it's like, what are you doing, right? So there's a little bit of a strategy involved in that, but then, if that turns out not to be the case, that's just going to mean we're going to need additional funding sources. There are other state programs like the neighborhood revitalization programs. There are opportunities potentially to reach out to state elected officials as the next budget session comes up, to see if there are grant funding sources through, like, Department of General Services, things like that. And then private, philanthropic, just all of the above. I mean, we've done projects that have more than a dozen funding sources. I would suspect that this is going to be one of those. So it'll keep our attorneys busy at the closing table. I'll just say that. So, and
I think we probably have time for maybe one more question if folks have it. Got about 2 minutes of scheduled time. Or feedback, comments. Okay, well, I am going to quickly share my screen again with just some next steps for this process, so we can all stay engaged around the next steps. Can y'all see this okay? Someone give me a thumbs up. Great, thank you. So just a few next steps on this process. The best way for y'all to stay engaged in this work is to sign up to receive our monthly newsletter updates. If you'd like to receive them and you are not currently receiving them, just pop in the chat with your email and I'd be happy to add you to those newsletters. They go out once a month and we provide updates on the work, and we also just talk about events in Baltimore that are exciting to attend. And we talk about the work of our National Housing Initiative at SAGE as well. So it's a great way to stay engaged to us and to this project. Also, I would just say, any emails added to the chat, I will add those to the list. And if you don't receive this next month's newsletter by the end of the month, just check your junk folder or your spam folder. Sometimes those newsletters can get lost in the junk folder. Other things to look out for from this project, we're going to have future events like these, listening sessions, town halls. We'll also have probably opportunities, as Patrick said, to collect more data on affordability needs and things like that. As we start to really flesh out the details of this project, we're going to want input. So there'll likely be surveys or other ways to participate and provide some of that feedback as well. We are also going to be participating in Baltimore Pride at Druid Hill Park, the festival, on the 16th. So come find us. I know Chase Brexton will be there as well with a lot of folks from the Elder Pride Council. They usually have a huge Elder Pride tent. It's amazing if you haven't experienced it. And then we will also be at Baltimore Trans Pride this year as well. And so we're very excited to share all of this information with the folks at Pride and Baltimore Trans Pride. So come find us. And then I'll also add that we are talking about how to set up a community advisory board or a board of folks that are really helping guide this conversation. And so check out the newsletter that comes out for more information about that as we know more. Monty, yes. Catch your hand
Yes,
raised.
I just wanted to remind everybody that hopefully we'll see you in the next week at National Honor LGBT Elders Day, which will be at the Meyerhoff Symphony Hall this year. So if you haven't heard about it or been to it, it is quite an experience. And I think Trisha can put the link in for the for any tickets, or if you want to sponsor, we would welcome that. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No apologies. I'm so glad you dropped it in. It's truly, truly, truly an amazing event on May 16th. I think Trisha dropped the link in the chat. Please, please, please come. It's amazing. So thanks, Monty. Any last minute thoughts?
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you so much. And thank you, Patrick, for sharing all of this in a timely fashion, and that people are informed and know what our next steps are. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlton.
Thank you all. Take
Yeah.
care.
Thank y'all. Y'all
Thanks
have a
all.
lovely day.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay. Thank you, Abby, and then also Mackenzie. And I know Michaela just hopped off, but thank y'all so much.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Too. Bye.